I experienced this incident 3 years ago, and that night, I almost paid with my life for opening the wrong door with the right key. I was returning from a business trip to Portland. Normally, I would have flown there and back, but this time I also had a meeting with clients in Washington State. Driving seemed more practical. The return trip took much longer than I expected. Days of non-stop rain made it hard to make any real progress. I had left at 6 in the morning. By 7 in the evening, I was still on the road. I had been driving for nearly 11 hours, and my eyes were burning. I desperately needed a place to stay. I opened Airbnb. Only one listing appeared on the map: an old house in the woods. The photos showed a time-worn wooden house with a wide veranda. It looked isolated, but well cared for. It was available. I booked it without even checking the price. I turned off the main road onto a narrow country lane. There were only trees around me. Massive pine trees blocked out the sky. Soon, the road almost disappeared altogether. All that remained was wet dirt and deep tire ruts. After driving a little farther, I finally reached the house. It looked exactly like the photos. 2 stories, wooden exterior, a wide porch. I pulled up in front of the house and turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, canapta steadily against the windshield, almost soothing. I took a deep breath. Then I ran toward the porch. The wooden steps were wet and slippery. A small brown doormat lay in front of the door. The owner had said the key was under the mat. I bent down and lifted it. The key was there, a heavy, old-fashioned key. I pushed the door. It opened slowly. I stepped inside. Something immediately caught my attention. There was the familiar smell of old wood and stone, but it wasn't stale or heavy. It felt like the house had been aired out recently, like someone had just left. The smell was comforting. It reminded me of houses that had been lived in for years, houses that still felt alive. I ran my hand along the wall, searching for the light switch. I found it and turned it on. The living room came into view. Dark, heavy furniture, a large leather sofa, a thick wooden coffee table with sturdy legs, deer antlers mounted on the wall, a stone fireplace in the corner. I stepped inside and looked around. Everything was clean, neat. This place is clearly well taken care of, I thought. I stood by the fireplace for a while, warming my hands. My jacket was completely soaked. I took it off and hung it on a hook beside the fire. Outside, the storm had intensified. The wind rattled the trees, and rain slammed against the windows. But inside, it was warm. I felt safe. It was nearly midnight. I was exhausted. I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes. The crackling of the fire was calming. I planned to rest for a moment, then head upstairs. That's when I heard it. The sound of an engine. At first I thought it was just the wind, but it was clear, and it was getting closer. I opened my eyes, sat up, and walked to the window. I parted the curtains. Through the darkness, I saw headlights moving down the muddy road. A vehicle slowly approached. Then it stopped in front of the house. It was an old pickup truck. Red once, maybe, but now drowned in rust and mud. The engine kept running. No one got out. I stood there, watching. Minutes passed. My first thought was that it might be the landlord. I took out my phone, found the host's number, and typed a message. "Hello, there's a car outside. Is it yours?" I hit send. The message didn't go through. No signal. I froze. The truck was still there. The engine still running. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it would leave. It didn't. After a while, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He wore a dark green raincoat and a hunter's hat. He was holding something. I leaned closer to the window to see better. It was a hunting rifle. My heart started pounding. He shut the truck door and began walking around the house. It was night. A storm was raging, and an armed man was circling a house that wasn't mine. I felt completely defenseless. I tried calling the police, no signal. I looked back out the window. He had reached the porch. He climbed the steps slowly, carefully. The porch boards creaked. Then he stopped. He stood right in front of the door. There was a sharp, metallic sound. The barrel of the rifle struck the railing. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, deep. "Whoever is inside, don't open the door. I'm waiting for the sheriff." Silence. I watched as he stepped off the porch. But he didn't leave. He walked toward the side of the house. A few seconds later, I realized where he was going. The fuse box. In old houses, it's outside. A small metal box. He opened it, reached in, and flipped the switch. The lights went out. The house was swallowed by darkness. Only the faint orange glow of the fireplace remained. The living room barely visible. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone. The screen was blinding in the dark. Still no signal. I opened the host's chat. I typed a message but didn't send it. I stared at the screen. Nothing changed. Footsteps echoed outside again. He was circling the house, this time toward the back. I went to the kitchen, checked the back door, locked. I checked the windows, all closed. I returned to the living room and crouched beside the fireplace, phone clenched in my hand. Time passed. Only the rain. The footsteps had stopped, but the truck's engine was still running. As I turned the phone in my hand, the screen lit up. A notification. One I hadn't seen before. And in that moment, everything made sense. "Hello, GPS sometimes gives incorrect directions. Please be careful not to accidentally enter my neighbor Mr. Miller's property. He doesn't like people trespassing. Our house is at the next turn." I read it again, then again. "No," I whispered. About 15 minutes later, I heard a siren in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. A sheriff's vehicle pulled up beside the truck. I opened the door and stepped outside, my hands raised. Cold rain hit my face. "Your name?" "David." "What are you doing here?" "I rented a house. The key was under the doormat." I showed him my phone. He read Martha's messages, then turned to the man. "Is the spare key still under the doormat?" No answer. The sheriff looked back at me. "Your rental is at the next turn. The GPS brought you to the wrong address." I nodded. "Get your things? You're not staying here." He drove me about 800 feet up the road. That was the real house. I didn't sleep at all that night. I left early the next morning, and on the road, I kept thinking, Mr. Miller was right. I had trespassed. Just because the key was in the right place didn't mean I was in the right house. What if the sheriff hadn't arrived? What if he had decided to use that rifle? I don't even want to think about it. All I know is this. That night, I entered the wrong house, and I almost paid for it with my life. I don't trust GPS anymore, or messages that say, "The key is under the doormat." And I never stay alone in wooded areas at night, because sometimes you think you're in the right place, but you're not, and that mistake can be deadly. I experienced this 2 years ago. At the time, I had no idea how deeply it would affect me. It was a weekday. This wasn't a planned vacation. I just needed to get away from the city for a few days. Nothing had been arranged in advance. Everything happened within the same day. I only needed a place to spend the night. When I checked the app for nearby options, there were almost none. Hotels were fully booked, and the remaining places were either too far away or impossible to reach by midnight. In the end, only one listing remained on the map, barely noticeable. A small Airbnb cabin. When I opened the description, one sentence stood out. "This is the only cabin currently active on the property. There's no one else nearby." Normally, that would have been reassuring. That night, it had the opposite effect. It felt like the sentence erased everything around me and left me completely alone. Still, I had no other option. I made the reservation. The host sent a short message through the app. It's been raining in the area for a while. The last 2 miles of dirt road may be muddy. Please drive carefully. By the time I turned off the asphalt and onto the dirt road, the rain was pouring heavily. The tires struggled to grip the mud. The steering wheel slipped slightly with every turn. The cabin appeared suddenly among the trees. Small, single story. A short porch with 2 steps. Water streamed off the roof like a curtain. A keypad was mounted beside the door. Inside, it was small but orderly. A kitchen counter, a sofa, a poster for a local summer event on the wall, a small electric heater in the corner. Phone reception was barely there. There was Wi-Fi, but it was almost symbolic. I hung up my coat, took off my shoes. When I stepped onto the floor, the cold of the wood traveled straight up through my feet. I poured myself a glass of water. It tasted metallic, but I didn't care. I checked the lights, locked the door twice, drew the curtains, made myself a filter coffee. The clatter of the machine and the smell of coffee made me feel normal, if only for a few minutes. It was past midnight. The rain hadn't eased at all. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard something. At first, I couldn't place it. It blended into the rhythm of the rain, then it came again. An uneven engine sound, like it was running, but struggling. I sat up on the edge of the bed and listened. This time it was closer. Then it went completely silent. Someone must have gone off the road, I thought. Stuck in the mud, but the host had been clear. No one comes here at night. I checked my phone. No signal. The host's last message was still on the screen. Good night. A little while later, another sound reached me. A brief scrape of metal. Not from the front door. From the side, near the base of the wall. Then footsteps in the mud. Not random, stopping, listening, moving again. My heart was pounding. Just the wind, I whispered. A branch against the wall. But the sound was real. Slow, rhythmic, and very close. I didn't turn off the lights. Being seen felt safer than sitting in the dark. I took a step toward the door. Only a few inches of wood separated me from whatever was outside, and I knew it was listening. "Who's there?" I called out. A man's voice answered from behind the door, calm, tired, too calm. "Hey, I need to check the water line." "What water line?" "There's flooding in the area," he said. "If it's not checked, the cabin could flood by morning." Through the glass in the door, I saw the tool in his hand. A wet, rusty wrench. "There's no one in the other cabins," he added. "I came because you're here. 2 minutes." Something inside me was suddenly very clear. I shouldn't open the door. "It's midnight," I said. "I'm not opening it." He paused, then spoke again, in the same even tone. "I understand, but this is my job. Message the host," I said. He didn't leave. Instead, he stepped away from the door and began walking around the cabin. He stopped near the wall, as if listening. Then he moved toward the back. From behind the cabin, his voice carried again. "If it's not checked tonight, it'll flood by morning." A moment later, from another spot, "There's no one else in the cabins." Then, almost to himself, "This is my job." That's when the inconsistency hit me. If no one else was around, why the urgency? And if the valve was outside, I didn't need to open my door at all. For a brief moment, a signal appeared on my phone. I dialed 911 before it vanished. I spoke calmly, on purpose. "I'm staying alone in a cabin. There's a man outside. He says he's maintenance, but he won't leave." The man outside shifted position, but he didn't go anywhere. He stood still at the front corner of the cabin, rain soaking his jacket. When the operator asked for the address, the map struggled to load. I tried reading details from the app. My voice stayed steady, even though I was shaking inside. The man was still there. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. He wasn't going to force his way in. He was waiting for the right moment. The operator stayed on the line. "They're on the way," he said. "Do not open the door." I looked through the window. The man stood in the corner of the cabin, rain streaming down his shoulder. His head was lowered. The wrench hung loosely in his hand. After a while, he moved again. Slowly. Carefully. He walked around the cabin and stopped near the side wall, leaning closer, as if listening. I didn't say the police were coming. He already knew, and he didn't seem to care. Then I heard it. A siren in the distance. The man lifted his head. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. Middle-aged, maybe in his 40s. As red and blue lights filtered through the trees, he stepped back, calmly. He let the wrench fall from his hand, as if his work was finished. The police car stopped. 2 officers got out. One scanned the area with a flashlight. The other approached the man. I stayed inside, watching through the window. "What are you doing here?" one officer asked. "Checking infrastructure after the rain," the man said. "I'm volunteering." "ID?" "I don't have it." "Your vehicle?" "Nearby." The officers exchanged a few words. One picked up the wrench and moved it away. The man didn't resist. He didn't panic. It was as if he had expected this outcome. He knew that if he couldn't get inside, the night ended here. They placed him in the police car. One of the officers then asked me to open the door. I opened it slightly. He was soaked from the rain, notebook in hand. "We don't recommend staying here tonight," he said. "If the road is clear, go to the nearest motel." I nodded. There was no other option. I gathered my things. My hands were still shaking when I got into the car. I stayed at the nearest motel. I didn't sleep at all that night. Days later, I messaged the host and explained what had happened. There was no reply at first. Then a short response came. "Yes. There have been similar complaints before. Someone posing as a maintenance worker." "What about the police?" I asked. "They investigated," he said. "But no crime was committed." I stared at the screen. The man hadn't forced the door. He hadn't threatened me. He had simply knocked, at the right time, with the right excuse. What saved me that night wasn't the lock. It wasn't my phone. It wasn't the police. It was the fact that I didn't open the door. And I still believe this. Not opening it wasn't a reflex. I just couldn't find a single good reason to open it. That was all. For me, the answer was clear. I don't know if it would be the same for you. I experienced this event in 2018, when I was 35 years old. If you arrived at a rental home and noticed a locked door labeled "unused old storage room," what would you do? I probably did what you would have done. I ignored it. Silence isn't always a good thing. I know that now, but at the time I was still looking for it. Not to escape noise, but to escape voices, human voices, constant notifications. That invisible pressure of city life we grow so used to that we stop noticing it. I just wanted to sleep for a few days without having to listen to anything. So I rented an Airbnb that was hard to find even on the map. It was in the northwest, about an hour from the nearest small town. The closest neighbor was so far away, you wouldn't even notice them while driving. The house was wooden, old, the kind built deep in the forest, standing completely alone. There was no fence, just trees. Tall, dark trees. Trees that grew even darker in the rain, swallowing the house whole. Phone reception was almost non-existent. That wasn't something I specifically wanted, but it felt like a fair price for solitude. I had only exchanged brief messages with the owner through the app. The key would be in a lockbox by the door. I didn't ask many questions. When I arrived, it had already started raining. Heavy rain, relentless. The windshield wipers moved in a slow, steady rhythm across the glass. Before going inside, I did my usual routine, looking around the property. That's when I noticed a small section attached to the main house with its own door. The listing referred to it as unused old space. It looked like a storage room. The door was closed. No key, no warning, just closed. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Old houses are like that, unused doors, rooms that don't open. I went inside. The house was cold, but it didn't feel abandoned. The wooden floor creaked softly as I walked. There was a fireplace in one corner, but I didn't light it. The sound of rain already filled the space. The furniture was simple, neutral, almost like a hotel room, as if no one had truly lived there in a long time. The first few hours passed quietly. The rain continued all evening. As night fell, the sound on the roof became steadier, more defined. The wind picked up, branches scraping against the house. None of it bothered me. It was exactly the isolation I had been searching for. Around midnight, I went to bed. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up. It wasn't a sudden awakening. It felt more like something gently pulling me upward, out of sleep. The rain was still falling. Same pace, same determination. But beneath it, there was another sound. Short, distinct, as if it came from beneath the floor. Like friction, like something moving very slowly. It wasn't inside the house, not in the walls. Lower, right beneath the wooden floor, close to the ground. It didn't sound like footsteps. It felt more like weight, crawling. The sound lasted only a few seconds. Then it stopped. I didn't get out of bed. It wasn't hard to find a logical explanation. An animal, a raccoon, a deer, maybe a badger. They're common in the area. That's what I told myself. I closed my eyes again. Sleep took some time to return, but eventually it did. By morning, the rain had weakened. The sky was gray. The ground still soft. I drove into town to buy snacks. My phone only regained reception once I was back on the road. It felt good to do something ordinary. When I returned, I walked around to the back of the house. I stopped in front of that small, separate section, the one locked from the outside. There were dark marks on the ground. The rain had partially washed them away, but they were still visible. They looked like shoe prints, but they weren't mine. The moment I realized this, I didn't crouch down to examine them. I didn't stare. I consciously stepped back. I chose not to think about it. Logical explanations still worked for me. The landlord, a previous guest, something from before I arrived. That night, darkness came early. When I lay down in bed, I heard something before falling asleep. A very faint, steady sound beneath the rain, from directly behind the wall. That wall bordered the closed-off section of the house. It was breathing. A breath through the nose. Controlled, restrained, close. Too close. So close that realizing the only thing between us was a thin wooden wall and insulation made my blood turn cold. The breathing lasted only a few seconds. Then it stopped. The rain continued at the same intensity, but I could barely hear it anymore. My mind was focused on listening for that sound again. It didn't return. Silence followed. But this wasn't the silence I had come for. This was a listening silence. I didn't move. I lay completely still. I didn't look at the door. I didn't look at the window. I didn't reach for my phone, because I knew that if I moved, I would make a sound, and someone might notice. After a while, another sound came. From outside the house, very close to the back door. That hollow sound of wet wood under weight. Someone standing on a rain-soaked surface. Then another step. Slow, measured, unhurried. The door handle didn't move. The door wasn't forced. Only someone was there, standing in the rain, just outside. In that moment, I understood something clearly. For the first time, I wasn't alone. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps continued briefly, then stopped, as if whoever was there didn't intend to come inside. A few minutes later, the sounds moved away. Slowly, carefully. The rain didn't stop until morning. As soon as the sun rose, I left. I didn't pack. I didn't make coffee. I didn't look back. I got in the car and drove straight to town. As soon as I had cell service, I called the landlord. He said the locked section hadn't been used in years. There was nothing inside. Animals roamed the area, he explained. I should probably blame the noise on that. I thanked him. Then I called the police. Later that day, during an inspection, they discovered something else. The locked section could be accessed from outside. While the door was locked, a small window behind it could be opened easily. Inside, they found an old blanket laid out to protect from the rain, empty cans, and a small battery-powered light. Someone had been using the space, temporarily. The police said this wasn't uncommon. People who live unseen, who remain unnoticed as long as they don't cause trouble. I filed a complaint with Airbnb. The listing was removed within days. There was no official statement, no further contact with the homeowner. But some silences, they don't hide sound, they hide presence. And once you notice that, you never sleep the same way again.